So this week, some sad news in the hockey world.
Yeah.
Mark Trees Laforest passed away
Oh, wow.
at only 62.
Okay.
And,
That's young.
way too young. And he was a former goalie
Okay.
for the Leafs back in the day. So if you followed them back then, or even if you just kind of, are a hockey historian, you'll remember him. And that's what we're going to deep dive into today.
Sounds good.
We're going to explore his career.
Okay.
And specifically, there's this one moment that really sticks out for a lot of fans. So
cool.
We got a news report here that kind of looks back on his life.
Okay.
And right away, there's this quote from
Mm-hmm.
Jim Ralph that really jumps out at you. Mm-hmm. And Ralph, of course, is another former goalie. And he's now a broadcaster with the Leafs.
Okay.
And he called Laforest a true character, great person, and even better friend.
Oh, wow.
And then he added the stories of trees.
Right. Will live forever.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you think that his time in the game was about more than just, stopping pucks.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, when you hear like a teammate and somebody who's so like embedded in the hockey community, talk about somebody with that kind of warmth, and like emphasis on storytelling.
Yeah.
It definitely tells you that guy probably had like a huge impact on everyone around him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like he transcended just being a hockey player.
Exactly. All right, so let's get into
like
the overview of his playing career.
Okay.
15 pro seasons.
Wow.
Is a good long stretch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just in the NHL.
Oh, all right.
Played in the AHL.
Okay.
The IHL and even some other like minor leagues.
Yeah.
And get this, he wore 17 different pro sweaters over the years.
That's a lot of laundry. Seriously.
He played for Detroit, Philly, Toronto, and Ottawa.
Wow, so he bounced around a bit.
He did, yeah, and he never actually played a full NHL season.
Interesting.
But he did have this really notable run with the Leafs in 89-90. And that was a year when they actually had like a few different guys in the crease.
Yeah.
So Alan Bester, Jeff Reese, and Peter Ing all got some time as well.
Wow. So a real carousel in net that year.
It was. Yeah. And it really just goes to show you like how unpredictable a goalie's career path can be.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, especially for goalies breaking into the NHL and then like staying there can be like a real challenge. And that kind of movement between the leagues and teams was just like a reality for so many talented players who were, maybe on the cusp or providing depth.
It really speaks to like their perseverance, just trying to keep that hockey career going.
Totally. And that 89-90 season for the Leafs. Yeah. Well, that's where we find this really memorable moment.
All right.
October 23rd, 1989. Okay. At Maple Leaf Gardens. Legendary. And there was this big, like, Donnybrook.
Okay.
A good old-fashioned line brawl. That started near the Devil's net. And in the middle of all this chaos. Laforest, who was in net for the Leafs. He finds himself getting taunted by the Devils goalie Sean Burke.
Oh, wow.
All the way across center ice.
So like goalie to goalie taunting.
Yeah, you don't see that every day, do you?
Not at all.
Right.
Goalie fights are so rare.
Yeah.
And they're just fascinating when they do happen. Like just the image of them coming from each end of the ice, taking off their masks, dropping their gloves.
It's great.
It's so dramatic.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's just captivating for the fans.
Totally.
It breaks the mold of a typical hockey fight.
For sure. And Laforest being, the good sport that he seemed to be, had this funny recollection of his initial reaction to Burke. He said from far away.
Okay.
At my side of the rink, Burke didn't look that big.
Okay.
So when I got closer,
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we've all had that feeling of
absolutely.
Things looking a little different.
For sure.
Up close.
Like you think you can take a guy.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's right there.
Yeah. And in this case, the reality was a pretty big size difference.
Okay.
Burke had 6 inches in height on him.
That's significant.
And about 30 pounds.
Oh, man.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about, like a physical confrontation.
Yeah, and what Laforest didn't know at the time was that Burke actually had more boxing experience.
So he was walking into a bit of a trap.
He was.
Oh, man.
So the first round of this unexpected goalie bout starts.
Okay.
And the report says that Laforest held his own while Burke was using that longer reach to his advantage. Yeah. And apparently all the other players on both teams, they just stopped what they were doing.
Wow.
And just watched.
So everybody just took a pause.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
The hush.
Totally.
That must have fallen over the gardens.
I mean, that just shows you how unusual that was. Like, in the middle of this brawl, everybody stops and just watches these two goalies go at it.
Yeah.
Like, that says something about the rarity of the situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody's so intrigued.
Yeah.
It's a total deviation from, like, a normal hockey scrum.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not the usual multiplayer thing.
Yeah. And then comes round two. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Laforest said he was trying to land like one good punch. Yeah. Figuring the ref was going to step in. Any second to break it up.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But guess what? Yeah. The ref had skated away.
No way.
Talk about being left.
Oh, man.
Defend for yourself.
That changes things.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big detail.
Yeah.
That totally changes the context of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Laforest thinking the ref's going to step in.
Right.
Like, that's the expectation in a hockey fight.
Right.
But nope. The ref's gone.
Yeah.
So now he's got to, like, change his strategy.
Yeah.
In real time.
Yeah.
You know, that just shows you how unpredictable live sports can be.
Yeah.
Things change in a second.
And then he gives this quote.
Okay.
That is just absolutely classic.
All right.
About his mindset at that point.
Okay.
He said, at that point, I wanted to get thrown out of the game anyway.
What?
We were down 5-2.
Okay.
It was my first home start.
Oh, right.
And I figured people would at least remember me for something good.
I love that.
Right. I was exhausted and had to have a cigarette later in the dressing room.
That's great.
You got to love that honesty and that, like, dark humor on a tough night.
Yeah.
It really gives you a sense of his
It can turn a peek into the mind of an athlete under pressure.
Yeah.
You know, he's not just reacting to the fight.
Yeah.
He's thinking about the game situation, his own performance. He wants to leave a good impression.
Yeah.
Even though they're losing.
Right.
Like, that self-awareness
Yeah.
and that touch of, like, gallows humor
Yeah.
is just so telling.
It really is. And the story gets even better with, like, the perspective he gained later on. So with the rise of YouTube, Laforest had this very funny take on the whole thing. He said, over the years, I began to think I'd done okay against Burke. But then they invented YouTube.
Yeah.
And everyone could see I didn't.
Oh, that's great.
Right.
I love that. The self-deprecating humor and the ability to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
Especially with instant replay.
Totally.
That's just fantastic.
Right. It really is.
Yeah.
It shows humility and a good nature about this, like, pretty intense moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, online video has definitely changed how athletes and fans look back on stuff.
Often with hilarious results.
Yeah.
But it just reinforces the idea that he was a character who didn't take himself too seriously.
Sure.
You know?
So let's put this goalie fight in the context of that 89-90 Leafs team.
Right.
Offensively, as we touched on, they were an absolute juggernaut.
Right.
The report says they had the most explosive single-season offense in franchise history.
Right.
They racked up a whopping 337 goals.
Jeez.
That must have been exciting to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you were a little nervous at the other end of the ice sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, a team scoring like that been such a thrill for fans.
Yeah.
You know, it suggests they had a super offensive-minded system.
Yeah.
Lots of high-scoring games. You can imagine the energy in the building.
I know. But as we often see with teams, that can light the lamp.
Right.
Like that, there can be a bit of a trade-off on the defensive side.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So the report points out that the team's defense was in a bit of a transition.
Right.
It was their first year.
Oh, wow.
Without the legendary Borche Salming.
That's a big loss.
Yeah, huge loss. And they had a few holes on the back end.
Okay.
So maybe they needed that high-octane offense just to keep up in games.
Yeah. You need to outscore the other team if you're giving up chances.
Exactly.
The defensive transition probably put even more pressure on the goalies.
Right.
I mean, when a team's giving up more chances, the goalie's performance is even more important.
Totally.
A good offense can win you games.
Yeah.
But to be like a truly good team,
right?
Consistent defense and solid goaltending.
Absolutely. And here's a really interesting kind of nugget from the report.
Right.
Despite those defensive challenges,
and the fact that Laforest didn't play the whole season, his .886 save percentage was actually the best.
Wow.
Among the 4 goalies who played for the Leafs that year.
That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, it's not what you would guess.
No, not at all.
Since he wasn't like the established starter.
Right. What does that tell you about his performance during that time?
Well, I think it suggests that even though he was sharing the net on a team that was known more for its offense.
More than its defense.
Yeah. He was still really effective.
Right.
And stable back there.
Yeah. It highlights how sometimes a player's individual contribution can get overshadowed by the bigger team narrative.
Totally. So beyond this memorable fight, it's clear that Laforest had a real connection to the Leafs and to hockey itself. He's quoted as saying,
I loved my time with the Leafs. And it's kind of interesting that growing up, he was actually a fan of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Oh, wow.
And he especially admired Tony Esposito.
Interesting.
But, it just goes to show you how your allegiances can change when you become part of the game at the highest level.
For sure. It's a common story with pro athletes. Like, so many of them grow up idolizing players from other teams. So to then play for a team like the Leafs with all its history and its fans, that must have been special for him.
Yeah. And probably kind of surreal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The report also mentions that his family was often at the Gardens to watch him play.
Nice.
Which is just, really emphasizes the personal side of the game.
Yeah.
And that support system that athletes have.
And I thought his comment about his goaltending style was really insightful. He said a lot of goalies were doing the butterfly and going down, but I was so small. I had to stand up. And I thought that just shows a real understanding of his own physical attributes and how he had to adapt his technique to be effective. It wasn't just about following the latest trends.
Exactly. It shows he was thinking critically about his game, finding solutions based on his own body rather than just, copying everybody else. That's the sign of a smart player.
Totally. And then his involvement in hockey didn't stop when he retired. He went on to coach in junior B hockey and was an assistant coach at Brock University.
Wow.
But what's really remarkable, his dedication to giving back through the game. He went on 5 goodwill trips with the Leafs and NHL alumni to visit Canadian forces in the Middle East and Europe.
Wow, that's awesome.
And they played ball hockey with them.
Really?
Yeah, that's a huge commitment.
It is.
That speaks volumes.
Yeah, it does.
About his character.
Yeah, that kind of engagement and commitment to supporting the troops, it shows real patriotism. Using his platform for something bigger than himself. Those kinds of experiences often give athletes a whole new perspective on the world.
Totally. And there's this great little story from one of the trips where he somehow kept a cigarette lit during a ball hockey game in the desert.
That's amazing.
And then he takes a shot to the mask.
Oh, no.
And smoke starts pouring out.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So all the air holes.
Oh, man. Classic Trees.
Right? It's exactly the kind of story that Jim Ralph was talking about. One of those Trees stories that you just can't forget.
That's great.
And it gives you a glimpse into his personality.
It does.
You can just picture it.
Oh, yeah. I can totally picture that.
Right.
Smoke billowing out of his helmet.
Yeah.
That's great.
So those trips really had an impact on him. He said they were the most gratifying experience he had outside of the NHL.
Really?
He said, I learned so much.
That's amazing.
About what our troops do.
Yeah, it really shifts the focus. From the game to a deeper appreciation for what these people do and the sacrifices they make.
Yeah, it shows a real genuine, thoughtful side to him.
Totally. It reminds us that athletes are often multifaceted people, with values and passions beyond sports.
Yeah. And in his later years,
it sounds like he found another passion, fly fishing.
Oh, nice.
He took it up seriously about 4 years ago.
Right.
And would make these trips into the Eastern Canadian wilderness.
Wow, so different.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like a complete contrast to the world of pro hockey.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he found a way to connect with himself and nature.
For sure.
It's a pretty common transition for athletes, after the demands of pro sports.
Right.
A lot of them look for things that are different.
Right.
Totally. Different kinds of challenges and, a sense of peace and connection.
Yeah. Fly fishing definitely fits that description.
Totally. So as we reflect on the news of his passing, it's clear that he was much more than just a former Maple Leafs goalie.
Yeah. He had this long and interesting career. Yeah. That super memorable moment in the goalie fight against Burke. And just a life filled with experiences. That really showed what a character he was.
Yeah, he definitely left an impression on everyone who saw him play.
Yeah.
Not just for his game, but for his personality.
Yeah.
All those great stories.
Yeah.
That are now part of his legacy.
And it really makes you think about how even like fleeting or humorous moments like that goalie fight become part of the larger story of a person's life.
It's true.
Yeah. His legacy seems to be made up of his time in the game, his unexpected adventures, and the real connections he made with people, teammates, fans, members of the Canadian forces.
It's amazing.
It makes you wonder how many seemingly small or even funny things that happen in our lives might end up being part of the stories that define us.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
It is.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Into the life and career of Mark Trees Laforest.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
Sounds good.